All right, hey everybody. We are live in the Radical Stress Relief group, and for day number 7, we have Gerardo Urias. I think I'm kind of pronouncing it correct.
Yeah, it's good.
Awesome. So we're going live, and there's some sounds here. But so we're going live right now, and Gerardo is the author of the upcoming book, Don't Kill Yourself. And we'll talk about when that's going to come out and how that book came about. But first, I want to just say welcome, Gerardo. It's great to have you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah, man. So it's good to see you, and I'm glad we're doing the live interview tonight. I've been pretty excited leading up to your particular talk, and I know a little bit about your story, but I want to get into it in more detail right now. So the first thing I wanted to ask you, so there was a really particular date that was mentioned to me by you and by your brother. That was December 22nd, 2017. Do I have that correct?
That's right.
Okay, so what I want to ask you first is, what was it like to be inside your mind and body around November 22nd, 2017?
So the date was December 22nd, which you said was your birthday. That is pretty coincidental.
Yeah.
That's pretty awesome. Prior to that, for the previous 10 months, it was absolute hell.
10 months, you said?
Yeah, 10 months, yeah.
Okay, well, let's get into that hell a little bit, just in case there's anybody else out there who's in that space right now, and maybe they'll be able to,
a lot of people.
We can meet them there and then see if we can help them come on out.
Right, definitely, right. So there's a lot to talk about here. I wrote some notes, a lot of information. If I go off on some tangents, feel free to reel me back in, because I can go on and on about a lot of different subjects.
Tangents are great here, so that's
tangents are great.
Carry on. Definitely.
We get lost in them sometimes. They get pretty specific, but the reason I'm here is to talk about how I overcame severe depression very recently, and it was about a year and a half ago that I was in that hell. So prior to December 22nd, 2017. Like I said before, those 10 months, I was in total depression, which was sparked by my life basically falling apart. I'll go back to the beginning of 2017, January 2017, my birthday month. Just a snapshot of my life. It was going very, very well. Life was perfect, as I believed at the time. I had reached the pinnacle of my success that I had really dreamt of my whole life. I was married, living in Mexico, a few blocks from the Caribbean, running a vacation rental business that I was married at the time. My wife and I had set up the year before, and we had spent 2 years prior to that traveling through Central America in search of a business opportunity. We after we got married in 2013, we decided to work hard for a few years, save all our money, and go out and pursue a dream. We were sort of sick of the rat race, the 9-to-5er. That was never my life. I was never into the 9-to-5 sort of a life. So we did that. We developed that dream and hit the road, and it was quite magical. 3 years on the road landed us in Mexico. And so everything's going very, very well at that time. A lot to talk about in that. I go into it in the book, of course, in more detail, but my marriage ended abruptly at the end of February.
Wow. So, okay, so you had this business going strong.
Yes.
We're just getting it all together, and we're going to start converting it over so that you can live in a way that you wanted to live.
Yes. We were already living that way. Business was already going strong for almost a year. It was already very automated. We were having to work very little. We had actually achieved the 4-hour work week, which, if you know what that means, Tim Ferriss's book is actually what sparked that whole idea. So I picked up that book about 2 years prior, read a few pages of it, got hooked, bought it, immediately read it in a few days, and we developed a plan. So that actually sparked that idea, and we actually achieved that after about 2 years.
Wow.
So we were both completely ecstatic. Business was starting to grow, and so we were in the process of growing the business and scaling it up. And I saw a wonderful future. Everything was going according to plan.
Mm-hmm.
And so then I went on a birthday trip to Europe to ski with my best friend from high school, ski a few weeks in the Alps. My birthday, January 29th. And so over there, it was just incredible, such a nostalgic trip, amazing skiing, and spent almost 3 weeks over there, just on the highest of high in life that I probably had ever been.
Mm-hmm.
So then I come home to a completely different scenario. Now, okay, in retrospect, our marriage had been on the rocks for 3 out of 4 years. So this was coming. We tend to mask the problems in our life, and we tend to picture things better than they actually are, especially when it comes to relationships.
Mm-hmm.
So, of course, it wasn't a complete surprise, but it caught me off guard. It caught me by surprise that it just happened like that. So when I got back, it took about 2 weeks for the culmination of basically 3 years of anger issues and ego battle to reach the breaking point. And then that was it. It was one night when we got into a serious fight, and then I just said I couldn't take it anymore. And so she left that day, March 2nd, 2017.
Wow.
And then I woke up instantly and realized, wow, everything's over. Everything I've worked for my entire life. We had liquidated everything back home in the US. So there was really nothing business-wise to go back to. Family was there, but we didn't have a home. We sold all of our belongings, had nothing back home. My life was in Mexico now. So
did that business stay together after that or not?
She actually stayed to try and run it for probably about 6 months or so. I wasn't in the mental place to even attempt to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, I mean, I completely fell apart.
Mm-hmm.
And so I decided to, at that point, I just had to clear my head. So I wanted to go back home just for a few weeks and be with my family and just sort things out and try and get things figured out. And so we agreed that she would stay and run the business while I go and figure things out. So I went home, and a few weeks after that, my dad died.
Oh, wow.
And so that, so there's another layer of that adding to the depression, anxiety at that point. Now I'm dealing with, with my dad's death. At the same time, I was going deaf. I had some serious health issues. I had a condition called otosclerosis, which is a calcification of the middle ear that is just hereditary. It's kind of a random, rare condition. And at that point, I hadn't realized it because it comes on very slowly. And the first noise and sound that you lose is background noise, which is really a lot more than you think about. So like, for instance, the sound of the ocean, the sound of traffic, the sound of the wind, all of those sounds you don't really think about that you just habituate to throughout life become background noise. I stopped hearing. And by the time I got my ears checked out about a month later, I was about 90% deaf. Oh, and then I realized how bad it was because I wasn't hearing anybody's conversations. It was really hard to hear anybody at all, especially in a public place, in a restaurant, for instance. The sound was it wasn't transferring into my brain. What happens is the stapes bone in the middle ear calcifies, hardens, and stops transmitting sound to the middle ear. So that was happening at the same time. The stress of all this exacerbated it. Doctors say that stress can bring it on. It can make it a lot worse. Deteriorates really fast if there's a lot of stress. So that's exactly what happened. So I was dealing with that as well. My blood pressure was out of control. I have type 1 diabetes as well. So that spiraled instantly out of control. I had been it had been very well controlled for many, many years. And then suddenly it went out of control. My blood glucose shot through the roof. I started having panic attacks, anxiety attacks. I ended up in the emergency room closer to that December 22nd date. Ended up in the emergency room for panic attacks. And it was serious, serious physical manifestation of all that stress. And that continued. So for 10 months, like I said, it just progressively got worse and worse and worse.
Wow. Oh, man.
Yeah. I
So
started drinking heavily.
Yeah, and the drinking always helps, right?
Yeah. Really good decision there. Let's just throw some alcohol into the situation. Yeah. So that happened, and I think a lot of people know how much trouble that can get you into. So about a week after my panic attack in, I think it was late November, around Thanksgiving time, I ended up in jail. So alcohol led to that.
Do you want to get into it anymore, or should we just leave it at that?
We'll leave it right there, because that's actually where it ended. Because a week after that was December 22nd.
Okay, so it wasn't something terrible because you got out.
That was about rock bottom. No, it was just a drunken argument with the manager at a bar.
Okay.
The stupidest thing you can imagine. Yeah.
Sure.
So I didn't get in any real trouble.
Yeah.
It's just kind of put me away for 24 hours,
Yeah.
Could have been. But that was rock bottom. I mean, I was just looking at myself in jail, just thinking, at that time, I was thinking, there's no way I'm going to make it out of this alive. There's no way. I was already convinced of that for a while, for several months. I was convinced that I wasn't going to survive this.
And you were thinking of actually killing yourself, or those kinds of ideas, or
right. So I would say it was suicidal ideation, which, if you know what that term means, it's the idea is present.
Mm-hmm.
It's before the planning stages. There's no planning. You just are aware of the choice, and it becomes more and more of a real choice. And so for me, it was a definite decision that I had no desire to continue my life the way it was going. And so there was going to be a way out. I just didn't know how. And that's about where I was. Yeah.
Wow. And so really at that point, the way out could have been suicide. Is that what you're saying? I mean, you knew that this was going to move, but you didn't know how.
Yes. After reflecting back on the whole experience, I realized that I was subconsciously trying to kill myself. Obviously, I was drinking a lot of alcohol, living very recklessly, hoping an accident would just happen, and then I just wouldn't have to make that decision.
Right.
So in a way, I was slowly carrying out my own death sentence. Eventually, I'm sure it would have gotten to a decision point if that continued.
And so so something fascinating about this is that I wonder how many people have said the same thing, like in that moment where the suicidal ideation is happening, and then they have, because you use a specific term, like I knew there was going to be a way out, but you didn't know what it was, and that didn't even seem like a positive force or a positive idea. Mm-hmm. But in a way, it could have been foreshadowing the actual way out, which turned out to be extremely positive. You know what I mean? Like there was
right, yes.
Which is fascinating. So a person in that state might not even know how to receive the message from reality or wherever it's coming from. That's saying, "Hey, it's almost done." They could be interpreting that as, "Oh no, I'm gonna die," rather than like, "Whoa, something's shifting around here." So then what happened during that week? I mean, was there anything out of the ordinary or anything that you remember that after? So you get out of jail. And then where's your head at this point?
Right. So at this point, going back with the timeline, I came across 3 tools basically to save my life. The very first tool that I came across was something called the Wim Hof method. You're probably familiar with it. I came across it coincidentally from someone that I met on Facebook who actually became a little bit of a mentor of mine. There was some key people who helped save my life. He was one of them. He was the only person who was able to lift my spirits. When I really hit rock bottom, I'd reach out to him, and he was really wise guy. And so he would say things that just made sense, and I understood them intellectually. I just couldn't really apply it to my own life. I couldn't absorb it the way that he was speaking it. So when I would speak with him on the phone, I felt better. But as soon as I hung up the phone, my reality came back, and then that was just gone. So after about a month of talking to him, he suggested, well, he kept telling me to focus on the breath. His advice was that the chaos that I am living is in my head, and it's only in my head. It's outside my head. The world is normal. The world is beautiful and great. I kept saying that. And that it all go back to the breath. Just focus on your breath over and over and over. And I just couldn't do it. I could not do it. So then he suggested the Wim Hof method. He sent me a YouTube video, and I checked it out. And I tried it prior to this day in jail. And I felt the buzz. I felt a little bit lightheaded, a little bit of a good buzz from all the oxygen. And it was the first time I had any feeling that was other than fear, anxiety, complete depression. The first sensation that I had that was different than that.
Wow.
And so that actually gave me, I felt a glimmer of hope after doing that. And that was about a week before this happened. And so when I was in jail, I remember, hopefully most people have never been to jail, but it's really hard to sleep in jail.
Yeah.
And so I was trying to get to sleep, and I remembered, the Wim Hof method, because I remember it relaxed me. It was just sort of a overall body relaxation feeling. So I started doing it, and I did it for probably about 10 minutes, and I did fall asleep. And so when I woke up, I was sort of relieved. I was thinking, wow, this is something, there's something to this method. So that's the first time I felt a little bit lifted. When I got out of jail, I think I was definitely more positive than the prior week and going into jail. And so that's when my mood and everything started to change very, very subtly. Now, I didn't realize the power of the method quite yet, so I was just doing it every once in a while. Mm-hmm. After that, and I was still, so I would feel good when I did it, but then the rest of the day, of course, I went right back to the darkness. It was just very little bits of hope. So a week after that, my brother suggested, well, my family was calling me saying, what happened? You ended up in jail. What's going on? You're on a downward spiral. Obviously, yes, I was. I knew that. Everybody knew. My whole family knew it. Nobody could help me, by the way. For those 10 months, my entire family was trying to help. My brother was calling me. My sister was calling me all the time. Friends were trying to talk to me. Everybody was doing the best they could to help me. But there's no getting through when you're in that state, in the state I was at least. There's no getting through. And so my brother's very concerned about me. So then he mentioned on that phone call after I got out if I wanted to try magic mushrooms. And that came out of nowhere because I had researched that before for the prior 2 years. Actually, I knew there was application of magic mushroom psilocybin for the treatment of depression because I was searching for something at that time to treat my wife's depression. She has suffered with depression, anxiety, stress her whole life. And so I had been looking for natural remedies for her. So I was aware of this already. I just didn't apply it to myself. Even when he mentioned it, that's how hopeless I was. I just thought, there's no way. There's no way to change this. The mushroom isn't going to change what happened. It's not going to change my life. It's not going to change the situation that I'm in. This is not. So I agreed just because I was willing to try anything if I had any hope. So I did agree, but I really wasn't hopeful. I had no expectation at all. I just figured, well, why not? I'll try it. In a way to appease my brother because he's trying to help. And I thought, okay, let's do this. So that is what happened on December 22nd. He came over with a few mushrooms, and I was staying at my sister's place in Oceanside on the beach. She had a small apartment right there on the beach.
Yeah, beautiful beaches right there too. Carlsbad and Encinitas.
Yes, good area. Beautiful, beautiful. That's my hometown. That's where I grew up. Very much hometown of mine.
Amazing beaches.
Such an amazing spot. And it's just so sad that those 10 months I couldn't see the beauty in it. Here I was in a oceanfront apartment, literally, and couldn't see the beauty in it. I just really couldn't. The ocean actually became gray. So this is some crazy things that happened with psychedelics. My world literally became dark. lost a lot of color. And I remember the ocean being gray and scary every time I looked out at the ocean, which is very strange because I grew up in Oceanside surfing.
Wow.
I love surfing. I'm going down to Mexico to surf this entire summer. So when you lose the motivation to do something that you've loved your whole life and it's right in front of you, it's pretty intense. And so those 10 months, I never even went in the water. I looked out at the water and it was just a dark, scary, gray abyss, a monster. It was just scary. Everything was scary. And so on December 22nd, we ate a few in the morning, took a walk on the beach, and about a half hour into that, I noticed that the ocean was blue again. It brought the color back. And it was beautiful again. It was absolutely beautiful. It took about a half hour for me to start feeling it. And I felt I'd done mushrooms a long time ago. I lived in Germany 20 years ago, and I experimented with it back then. Amazing experiences, of course. It was recreational. I was 20 years old. So it was very different. But it was just incredible. So I remember the feeling, and as soon as it hit me, it was like a nostalgic euphoria that I remembered from 20 years ago. And I became very happy all of a sudden that it was back. It was the first feeling of joy that I had.
Yeah.
Especially since I had completely given up on the idea of joy or happiness or anything that felt good was not a possibility anymore. At all.
Wow.
And so in a half hour, I had this great euphoria. I look out at the ocean, bright blue, beautiful, noticing the pelicans, the dolphins, noticing everything and how beautiful it was. And since then, the ocean has stayed blue. So that was such a miraculous moment right there. And really, from that moment on, about half hour into that day, the depression has been gone. It really ended abruptly, just as abruptly as it started. Yeah.
That's amazing. And it's not like this is just out of left field. You know, there's so many, I think the last 2 or 3 years, there's been the most money dedicated to studying the effects of various psychedelics, and specifically psilocybin and MDMA, actually for very serious post-traumatic stress. You know, people have been in bombs and warfare and all this kind of stuff.
Incredible results, right?
Yeah, and it's not unprecedented at all. And at this point, the stigma should be, I think it's starting to lift, actually. I mean, because you have even U.S. military funding these studies. So, but not only them, but a wide swath of people on both sides of the political spectrum are supporting it. It doesn't seem to be only governed by one side or one, it's not a partisan issue, actually. Maybe that's because of the military involvement. I don't even know, but it doesn't matter as much as the fact that it's getting out there. And it looked like in Colorado or Denver, I think it's a city vote, is it?
Yes, today actually.
Oh, fascinating.
Yeah, real exciting. So this is the first time in U.S. history that we are able to vote directly to legalize a psychedelic, and that vote is happening today, coincidentally. So it's a very good day. Today, history is going to be made. And I'm certain that it's going to pass because it's just common sense. It's just common sense. So this is a really, really exciting day, actually, for what I'm doing. I mean, the reason I'm writing this book is to help others, to help save lives, and the mechanism to do that is to raise awareness for legalization so that we can implement this into actual therapy. And that begins today. It's so exciting.
So Leo just posted a comment saying, and that's your brother, for people who don't know. He said, bro, talk about the SpaceX thing.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah, I mean, okay. There's so much to talk about. So the ocean turns blue, right? And then he starts feeling it. We walk down the pier for about an hour, have an amazing time looking down at the dolphins and the waves, the motion of the ocean. Another thing I had not noticed, I had not paid attention to. became just this beautiful, beautiful, natural breathing of the earth that if you've ever had a psychedelic experience, you know that if you have a little bit of heavier experience, things tend to start breathing and coming alive. And you just really start noticing things. So the waves, again, I'm a surfer, so I was just fixated by the waves. And we spent about an hour on the pier and then about an hour walking back, just having the best morning ever. And I mean, just hours before, I was ready to kill myself. You know, it was insane. And so we decided, wow, the beach was so amazing. Let's pack a day bag and walk the opposite way, because we walked north to the pier. It's about a half-hour walk. So we packed a day bag and decided, let's head south this time, down towards Carlsbad. It's very low tide. If you've ever been in Oceanside on a very low tide day, you can walk almost to San Diego.
Right, I've seen that. Yeah, because the sand. There's the cliff side, and then there's the sand.
Yeah, with those bluffs over the bluffs are just beautiful, and they continue forever down Solana Beach, down to Del Mar, and so you could see forever. And it was just so enticing. And so we did that. We packed a bag and headed south. And I remember thinking at the time, I've never walked to Carlsbad. I grew up here. This is always happening. You know, there's always low tides. It's such a beautiful walk. I've never done it. Why have I never, ever done it? Have I been too busy? My entire life? I was struck by, wow, I've missed out on my entire life on just taking this beautiful walk. So we did that. And it's about 5 miles. So it's a long walk. And that took obviously a few hours, and just had the best beach day. I mean, we went deep into some conversations. We were playing in the water, getting in the water, checking out hundreds of birds, and just the whole ecosystem of the ocean, the sand, how everything felt, laid down in the sand. Did some Wim Hof breathing, actually, because I just discovered that about 2 weeks ago, and I was really excited about its potential. And so I did a little Wim Hof breathing, and wow, it was the mushrooms, accentuated the feeling. And so I was just getting this entire euphoric buzz from head to toe, and just a feeling of alertness, because if you've tried the Wim Hof breathing, what it does is you're infusing your body and your brain with oxygen. So it just like lights you up. And it actually also releases endorphins, cannabinoids, opioids, and DMT. We can go far into Wim Hof method in a little bit here, but there's a lot of science to that too.
Yeah.
And that as well, he is healing a lot of depression, anxiety, hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands of people around the world. That also is its own movement.
Right.
So I was playing around with that. I was just like playing around with this new world that I didn't have a few hours before. And now I had all of these things, all of these tools, and a beautiful, beautiful world. And that walk took a few hours. We watched the sunset on the beach, of course. Absolutely, the colors insane. One of the most incredible sunsets I've ever seen. And I've seen a lot of beautiful sunsets. And then we decided, okay, it's been about 6 hours of absolute euphoria, perfect beach day, walking 5 miles. We're pretty tired, pretty exhausted, a little worn out, and extremely happy. And so there was a feeling of like celebration in the air. I just felt, wow, excited again for the first time in 10 months. And I've never had depression. I've never dealt with depression. I've always been pretty ecstatic. I felt like my whole life. So it really crushed me when I just lost excitement and motivation in my life. I've always been motivated, and it was very scary that I lost that element of myself. So now I instantly got it back. I had that motivation. So we decided to go and grab a beer or a drink over at the bar right there in Carlsbad, bar I used to frequent a lot. And so
what place was it?
The campus. It used to be Peabody's.
Okay, yeah, I know that spot.
Yeah, you know exactly in that little center. Yep, beautiful spot right there. Mm-hmm. I mean, I spent so many years there. I used to work across the street, so it's very nostalgic. Just kind of going down memory lane.
Yeah, and it's a beautiful place, even in the winter like that, And even the water, as I recall, the water in December is still kind of warm. It's warmer than it is in LA for sure.
Definitely, yeah. And it gets cold, but you can definitely wetsuit it all year.
Yeah.
Which I plan to do hopefully tomorrow when I head down there. So we sit down at the bar, we order a few drinks, and finally settling down, relaxing. If it was very intense, a lot of action throughout the day, especially mental action. Just nonstop. So we finally get a chance to just settle down, take a little break. And as soon as we did that, as soon as our drinks were delivered, we heard some people screaming over on the right, and this lady was pointing up at the sky, looking up at the sky, like, "Oh my God, what is that?" And we were just like, "Whoa, what now?" I thought the craziness was over. And so we walk over there and we look up. There's a huge rocket in the sky, blasting through the sky, just a giant, bright rocket illuminating the entire sky. And we were just blown away. We were like, what on earth is that? What is going on? And so it turns out it was the Falcon 9 launched by SpaceX out of Vanderbilt in Santa Barbara. And so they were launching their rockets, doing their thing, which I had no idea about. And then right then it broke up into its casings into 3 parts, and there was three parts of the rocket illuminating the entire sky. And everybody was just outside. I'm like fireworks, but it's a rocket, it's even better. Yeah. And everybody was outside just enjoying this energy, and it felt like they were in my trip because everybody's just like, yeah, this is incredible. Right. And so we were like, wow, this can't get any better. Okay, what's gonna happen next? And some more things did happen next. We hopped on a train, we went down to Solana Beach, met up with my niece Laura and her boyfriend, had some beers at Pizza Port, always a favorite of mine.
I love Pizza Port, yeah.
Totally. Such a great, festive little spot. Mm-hmm. Had awesome conversations with them the rest of the night, and went back to where they were staying, and capped off the night with family. And it was the most beautiful day I could have possibly imagined. It was insane. And throughout this entire day, all of the thoughts that I have had the previous 10 months that I couldn't stop, these negative thoughts, this fear, the lens that I was looking out at the world through, I could not stop it every second of every day. And during this 12 hours, whatever it was, there was none of that. It was all gone. There was no room for it. There was no room for it because your senses are opened up so wide that you're taking in so much sensory information that is so beautiful that there simply is no room for other thoughts. It literally traps you into the present moment, which is how it works. And since then, I immediately started studying all this, and that's why I decided to write a book about it. Mm-hmm. And that's what happened. So, I mean, it was just magical.
Yeah. Yeah, I can tell. It sounds like it, man. And I know some of those feelings from doing the mushrooms, and it's I can totally relate. And it's sad there's been such a stigma around them for so long, because if there wasn't, then I think people might not, so many people might never even get to that point of suffering in that way. Exactly. Or it would be available, at least in some context, where you'd be able to do it. But you were obviously totally safe. Things were fine right down there on the beach. Nothing's going to go wrong. And often on those substances, even less stuff goes wrong. Now, it might be different in a recreational context. People are pouring alcohol in their face and mixing other things and all this. But if it's a good source and it's doing it alone, and then you're out in nature, it's really really hard for anything to go too far or astray.
Right. Yeah. And it's, again, I had these experiences before, so I felt confident enough going into it that I wouldn't lose, that nothing bad would happen. I felt comfortable with my own dealing with it. Mm-hmm. So, I wouldn't recommend this particular way that I did it for somebody who's never tried it. Right. So obviously the push for legalization is not to eat these and take a walk down the beach. That's what worked for me. But what the push is for is so that it can assist psychotherapy. So it's actually psychedelic assisted psychotherapy. Mm-hmm. So in this therapeutic application, what you do is you eat these psychedelics and you work out your problems with the therapist right there in the room for 6 to 8 hours. You spend the night there, and it's completely controlled. Mm-hmm. That is the safest way to do it. That's what we're trying to accomplish with
And I would
engineering.
hope, I would still say some amount of nature would be
Yes,
really, really important. So it's not in, a white enclosed padded cell or something like that,
Yeah,
Some
it's interesting because when they started doing this research, so there is a big misconception surrounding psychedelics. There's a lot of history that people don't know. I guarantee it. It's quite mind-blowing. If anybody is interested, I highly recommend reading Michael Pollan's book, How to Change Your Mind. It goes into the entire history of psychedelics, the current science of what we understand, which is brand new because we didn't have these brain imaging technologies back in the 50s and 60s when they started this research. But back then, there has already been 2 decades of research into the application of several psychedelics, LSD, psilocybin, mescaline, and even DMT, MDMA, like you said. 20 years in the 50s and 60s, they were showing the same results we're getting now, but it was more of an objective outsider's clinical observation. We didn't have the imaging technologies we have now. So we are understanding the mechanisms at play in the brain now for the first time ever in pretty high detail. So it's pretty exciting. I think the knowledge is going to move very fast on this and hopefully dispel those misconceptions that have been around. The reason that they're illegal is not because of science, it's because of politics. If you go into the history of it, and Michael Pollan does a very good job of explaining all that, it was all political and had nothing to do with health or science. So now that it's reemerging, that's what we're seeing through science, and that's why this is happening so fast. They actually just opened, I believe, a week ago, the first ever facility specifically dedicated to psychedelic research at the Imperial College in London. Tim Ferriss is one of the backers. He's been one of my mentors for a long time. He and 4 others are privately funding this section of the university for specific studies for all kinds of psychedelics. And they actually built a prototype facility for what they envision in the future, what a facility for treatment will be like. So this is already happening. And, part of my message here is, number one, we have to lose the societal fear, the societal ideas towards them, which are based on lies. I mean, it's as simple as that. It's based on politics.
There's some simple arguments to be made that are extremely clear already, even without the science of it. There's the fact that people are not running around afraid to get on the highway in their cars, but the statistics, the openly available statistics are that's your like even when I was doing a lot of wilderness trips, they would when they were teaching new students about the biggest danger on any wilderness trip is the ride to the trailhead, not any animals, not falling off a cliff. Statistically, your chances of dying are the most on the drive there, even to the most wild areas in the world. And then add on top of that, alcohol, tobacco, and then overeating, to name 3 that are killers of people all the time. You know what I mean? So then, like, the risk assessment for most people is so far askew. It's easy to have a simple conversation about those points, to illuminate them and to say, so obviously, and then if you're facing the depths that you described, if someone's feeling like killing themselves, then almost anything besides killing yourself should be on the table. You know what I mean? Like, okay, well, I could get in trouble. I could, I could get hurt or something, but.
If you're already knocking on death's door, then you have to try anything.
Exactly. So, and then, the restriction is absurd. And I think, and I don't consider myself on either side of the political spectrum, but more, I don't know, some bizarre brand of conservative, meaning small government, small amount of restrictions, as few as possible, except for where necessary to provide a good life for as many people as possible, but with as little restriction as possible, and with as little destruction of wild areas and as little, So I would say that, it makes total sense to not make it illegal. And I suspect some amount of why it's illegal as well. And part of why I'm doing this whole summit is that psychiatry has had a stranglehold on the way we define how our mind works.
Right.
100 years, it's not even that long. People used to think outside of all these boxes of anxiety, depression, ADHD. And there were a lot of different ways to think about life. And people in a way were more mentally tough before everything became psychologized and psychiatrized and all this.
Right.
And then when you add in the pharmaceutical influence on it, which then is a huge money influence. And I'm not saying money's evil, but I'm saying unchecked, pharmaceutical industries have obviously done some amount of this banning of certain drugs and then pushing of other drugs. Because obviously, you're not using mushrooms every single day in a pill, but if you would have gone to a psychiatrist, you might be using that every single day. Oh, your screen went green there. I don't know.
Yeah. I'm seeing that.
Maybe press stop cam and start cam again. That might help.
Let's see here. Stop cam.
So anyway, I digress, but I wanted to illuminate those points. I know you've probably thought about all these things too. Interesting. Maybe that was the end of the camera.
Let's see. Can you hear me still?
Yeah,
Can you hear me?
I hear you just fine. Yeah. So
really interesting. Okay, well, we can keep talking and I'll try and play around and get it back. Yeah, I pressed stop cam, but it's not doing that. Share screen.
Well, if it doesn't come back on, that's okay. And we can...
yeah, we can keep talking.
Yeah. So maybe leave it like this. It has a little screen image, but the whole thing will still continue broadcasting. So
okay. So yes, I did want to mention one point on that. You mentioned the pharmaceuticals and psychiatry, and I am pretty certain this whole idea is new to a lot of people. The idea of applying psychedelics in psychiatry and mental health. But again, this has already been around and been studied for 2 decades, back in the 50s, 60s, before it was made illegal. The research into LSD is actually had a big part in the rise of neurochemistry, which led to the discovery of serotonin, which led to the development of SSRIs, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, which are the classic antidepressants that are offered in psychiatry and mental health now, which I was on those for several months, and they wreaked havoc on my body. I had major digestion issues and really bad insomnia since I started taking them.
Wow, that's interesting.
I was on these generic for Zoloft, and a week after I stopped taking them is the first night I actually slept 8 hours since I started them. So these side effects, as everybody knows, are pretty severe. And so I just want that's a pretty important fact, I think, when people think about mental health and pharmaceuticals, and the idea that this has already been intertwined with mental health since the 50s. If it wasn't for the discovery of LSD, we wouldn't have antidepressants. So in essence, they were using LSD to treat depression in the 50s, 60s, which had a very high success rate. And then, as we do in science, we like to dissect things and break them up into their components and isolate them, and then make our own marketable version of them you can make money on, which led to the development of SSRIs, which for me did not work. And actually, in studies, most SSRIs, if not all of them, performed just above the placebo effect.
Oh man!
So that's where the efficacy lies and has lied right now. And for me, that doesn't work. For me, that is not success. So, that should hopefully give people an understanding of the connection that psychedelics have had for a long time already in the mental health industry.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I did not know that fact. I knew about the LSD studies, but there's some bits and pieces of the data that was missing for me. I know around John Lilly, during that time. And I should connect you with Lee and Glenn. I don't know if you saw their interview.
I did. I loved it.
Yeah, they were amazing. And there's stuff they didn't talk about that we didn't get to, but they were very close with John Lilly. I don't know if you came across his name in any of your studies yet.
I think I'd heard that name. Not sure too much about him.
But you might want to add that to the list. And he was even advocating shooting different substances into the veins. I mean, this was back in the 60s or 70s, but he was a dolphin researcher. I won't get too into it, but just you might find some very interesting stuff there. And then in their book that they're working on, they're going to put out. They're also going to put a bunch of the stories around John Lilly during that time into the book as well. So
that's awesome. That's great.
And they're in their 70s and 80s, those two, and have done countless amounts of those types of things back in the 60s, 70s with Lilly. So we came across Alexander Shulgin. Did you?
Yeah. I read a lot about him. Yes.
Amazing story.
Major player in all this, right?
Right, bringing all this stuff back.
Story,
and again, shooting up mega doses of pure MDMA and other things all the way into his 80s.
Right.
I mean, and, so yeah, they were defying the fear mongering, basically, that was around all that kind of stuff. And he made it possible for a lot of those substances to move forward, beyond his lifetime.
Right. Yes. Right. Another very interesting fact that I think a lot of people don't know is the application of psychedelics for addiction. Now, we tend to think of mental health and depression, anxiety, stress, addiction as separate conditions. I think that's sort of what science and psychiatry has done. Our perception of these issues are a bit separate, but from my experience and all the research I've done, they're pretty much all intertwined. If you have depression, you're probably going to have addiction. You're probably going to have stress. You're probably going to have anxiety. It's a problem at the source that manifests in all of these that I really don't believe are separate issues or separate conditions.
Right.
As I said, I started drinking heavily, so I definitely became severely addicted to drinking, but it was addicted to escaping my life. It was an escapist strategy. And addiction is obviously very dangerous. And most people don't realize when it comes to alcohol, we all know Alcoholics Anonymous. This is a very, very interesting fact. Bill Wilson was the founder of Alcoholics Anonymous. In 1934, Bill Wilson tried a psychedelic called belladonna, which is similar to LSD. He had it administered in a hospital in Manhattan.
Wow. And
he was an alcoholic prior to that. So this experience blew him away so much that it sobered him up. One year later, in 1935, he founded Alcoholics Anonymous. And the 12 Steps program that we all know from Alcoholics Anonymous is actually based on his experience of transcending to a higher self. The whole idea of transcendence and surrendering to a higher power is actually based on his psychedelic experience.
That is amazing. I did not know that. I knew some of the history, but I did not know that piece as well. That is amazing.
Mind-blowing. And this was 1935, right? So it wouldn't be another 8 years until Albert Hofmann synthesized LSD for the first time. When that happened, it immediately was introduced into psychiatry, and that's when all the studies for LSD and psychedelics for the application of mental health started. A few years into that, Bill Wilson caught wind that they were doing research with addiction, so he became curious to see if the LSD was similar to the belladonna that he had, and he went to LA to experiment with that a few times and became so convinced that LSD could occasion, as Michael Pollan states it very well in his book, it could occasion the kind of spiritual awakening that one needed to get in order to get sober, like he did. So he actually tried to implement LSD into Alcoholics Anonymous therapy, but it was the other two partners who were uncomfortable with the idea of adding a mind-altering substance into therapy would muddy the brand. And so ultimately it wasn't done. But this was actually already has been tried to be implemented into Alcoholics Anonymous for addiction. So again, we took something that worked, LSD, well, at that time it was belladonna, that sobered Bill Wilson up and created Alcoholics Anonymous that the world knows, the entire world knows Alcoholics Anonymous. And that's the source of it, you know. So that's those are two very interesting facts that I want people to know so they can start understanding when they think about psychedelics that it has been in mental health for decades. This is not a new idea.
And it's been in human history for as long as there's been recorded human history. I mean, there's even some arguments made that it was there, that there were mushrooms in cave paintings of various sorts, and certainly in oral traditions, the stories that have been passed down. There's elements that seem pretty related to psilocybin, and then of course belladonna and the various other plants that are out there. I wouldn't recommend people go searching for those plants without a serious amount of knowledge, obviously.
Most definitely.
But there's plenty of guides and people around that now that can, if you're interested, I'm sure can help you.
Right. Right. Yes. I mean, yes, psychedelics have been around for thousands of years, thousands and thousands of years. There's actually a theory which I believe, I sort of believe that psychedelics is actually what sparked religion, you know, hundreds of thousands of years ago.
In our book, something like
makes sense.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Isn't there a book, something like, I forget the name of the book. It was trying to show the origins of Jesus as a mushroom or something like that.
Okay, probably. I'm sure there is. I recently read an article of how Moses was tripping on mushrooms when he saw the burning bush and wrote the 10 Commandments.
Ah, very fast.
So it actually is based on some factual stuff. It's kind of interesting, but I can see that. I can see that as a possibility.
Mm-hmm. So do you think in our time it will be something that becomes available? I guess it is on some level available, but that it'll become more widely available as a treatment option? Or do you think there'll be a lot of pushback from psychiatry and the pharmaceutical companies, this kind of thing?
No, I think it's already started. I think it's a huge wave right now in mental health care. I think it's inevitable. It's already going on. There's plenty of underground therapy that you can access. The science is just irrefutable. It's much too strong. I mean, you take a look at the legalization of marijuana that just occurred recently, and that occurred relatively quickly. And the science at the time when that started wasn't nearly as strong as the science is for psychedelics. And the beautiful thing about that is the legalization of marijuana has laid out the roadmap for legalization. So the push for this is simply copying that exact same roadmap and legalize psychedelics even faster. I think it's going to happen even faster than marijuana.
Yeah, it very well could. I recall comedian Doug Stanhope, maybe a decade ago, maybe a little more, before the marijuana was getting legalized in many states. And he was talking about when they were pushing for medical marijuana. And he said, he's like, no, I want to start this argument where it starts. We are not free until I can buy magic mushrooms at Walmart. You know, I remember him saying, and now we're getting toward a reality where that might happen. And I'm not arguing in favor of Walmart's, but it's the point he's making is as soon as this should be available for anyone, anywhere in America, you know, at the very least,
right?
And really in the rest of the world, but specifically America, where should have a bit of a smaller government and less restriction on what's available to people. So
well, and I mean, it's really not that far fetched. I mean, it is a mushroom. You know, there's a lot of mushrooms at Walmart. It really is. We've attached this stigma to it, this fear to it. It has been a mushroom for millions of years. Actually, if you look at fungus itself, Michael Pollan's book is so excellent because he has a whole chapter dedicated to just the idea of fungus and how important fungus is. We're barely starting to actually really absorb how much we wouldn't exist without fungus. The fungal kingdom actually predates the plant kingdom. And without fungus, plants and life as we know it would not exist. Forests and trees exchange resources through these vast mycelial networks. Mycelia is what fungus is called. These vast mycelial networks under these forests is how they exchange information, exchange nutrients, and it's much more vast than we ever knew. And we are actually made of fungus ourselves. That's why it's difficult to make an antifungal medicine, and it's easy to make an antibacterial medicine. It's hard to combat something that you are made of. And so if you've ever had like one of those toe funguses, which I had for several months, it's really hard to get rid of it. You have to take this medicine that's harsh on the liver, harsh on the kidneys. It takes a while. And that's because it's very hard to battle fungus with fungus. And so we're learning the importance of fungus. It is not something to be feared. It is not something that is evil. We need it. You know, it's a very natural, it is just literally a mushroom. It has mental effects, but you know, there's different foods have different effects on lots of things. So it's no different than that. It's no different than just eating ginger for the properties that ginger has. It just happens to be that the perception of what's going on in your mind is pretty intense, but it is a mushroom, and it has virtually zero toxicity. So, you know, again, to lose the fear of psychedelics, the classic psychedelics, which are LSD, psilocybin, mescaline, and DMT, dimethyltryptamine, really have zero toxicity. There are no overdoses because it's impossible. So as far as toxicity, there really is none. Very, 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 very little.
Yeah.
So people understand that.
Right. I mean, and if you take a whole bottle of aspirin, then your life's over.
Right.
But I mean,
much more, right. I guarantee 80% of any pills that you have in your bathroom, in your cupboard, are much more toxic than the most mushroom, a whole bag of mushrooms you can eat. I mean, there is no overdose. Of course, you go into a mental, you know, I mean, mental chaos, but that's not toxicity. That's just your mind. Right.
And in a way, that mental chaos was already there. I don't think that's
right.
added, you know, by the mushrooms.
Right.
So what would you say to someone watching who's dealing with the depths of despair? I mean, what should a person do? I mean, because like, as you said, even though you can look back and hear, like you mentioned that your body was telling you, oh, the chaos is all in your mind. The world is beautiful. It's just your mind that's going anywhere. Now you could probably see the truth of that and know physically the truth of that. But as you mentioned, there was no way that could penetrate into those depths of darkness. So what can penetrate those depths? Do you think that it's just in a way that reality has to do it for them, or what is it? You know, what would you tell somebody? What is going to get reached down in there?
Right. Well, so the way depression plays out in the brain, and what they have been able to see during these studies is essentially they've been able to pretty much map out the ego. Some people may understand what the ego is. I'm speaking of it as a mental construct. So the way life works is you're born, and when you're born, you're a clean slate. Your brain is a clean slate. You know, you see kids looking at the world with all possibilities. So that's why they're able to have invisible friends, because they're actually there, you know. And then you go through life when you're a child, and you have these experiences. Through those experiences, you develop the ego. You develop who you are, the story of you. It's a collection of experiences. Your brain is pretty much a recorder. Recent studies show that every single memory now we understand every single memory is actually imprinted in your short-term and long-term memory, every single thing. So you actually remember everything you ever come across somewhere in your brain. And it really doesn't go away. There's actually people who have tripped on psychedelics who remember being born, and they go back to analyze the data of something that they said, and it happens to be true. So memories are stored forever. And your ego is that story. Now, if you have a lot of trauma, if you have a lot of bad things going on in your early life, you develop a certain perspective. That perspective for me became a very dark place. It's literally the story that I'm telling myself. The biological processes that occur in your brain when rumination starts and negative thought patterns, they tend to reinforce themselves because it's based on survival. So you don't want to repeat the same mistakes. You don't want to come across the same threats. So it's very hard to escape that biologically. I guess, you know what, that's a very good point. Now that I've thought about this a lot, is stress, anxiety, and fear, our brain is meant to feel that. It's meant, there's nothing wrong with you if you're stressing and if you have high anxiety. 100,000 years ago, we were running from lions and tigers and bears. And so
Right.
that's the environment that we've developed to live in. So there's nothing wrong with stress. It's just it doesn't apply nowadays to the way we're living. And so what needs to happen when these neurological patterns just reinforce themselves and deepen, the grooves of self-reflection deepen, is something needs to disrupt it. I mean, really physically something needs to disrupt it, and that's very difficult to do. That's why psychedelics are so promising and so powerful against this is what happens. And when you look at the science of it, is it disrupts that pattern. It disrupts literally the blood flow. So your resting state, when you're just ruminating, when you're worrying, they have mapped it out in what is called the default mode network, which is essentially your ego. And blood flow increases in that area when you worry, when you just daydream or self-reflect. On psychedelics, that blood flow is reduced dramatically. And the blood flow rerouted to the rest of your brain, which is why you all of a sudden have these creative ideas, which is why you trip, essentially, is because your brain is now mixing senses. It's called synesthesia. When your amygdala, or your brain that processes fear and emotion, is mixing signals with your visual cortex. You start seeing demons, things like that. Or you start hearing colors because your auditory senses are mixing with your visual cortex.
Right.
And so what happens is you create new novel connections, and with those new novel connections, you get new perspective on life, new perspective on ideas. And the amazing, magical thing that they're finding is those connections seem to stay, sometimes months, sometimes years.
Well, there's something else in there that maybe it's not even mappable, but that what you said about a perspective is that, and this is where it might differentiate between recreational and therapeutic use, or outdoor nature experience versus a party, let's say. Not to say it couldn't happen in those other contexts, but that that the perspective shift doesn't take any physical effort to happen, and that can happen, I mean, with or without psychedelics. But a perspective shift is permanent. There's no going back, and there's not really a way to track it in the mind. Maybe there is neurogenesis that happens, like new neurons or new connections between neurons
Yes.
when a perspective shift happens. But it doesn't necessarily mean that there could be the perspective shift and then the neural network maps itself onto.
Right, it reinforces it, right. Kind of
Like if you thought that houses were built out of rubber and candy or something, and someone shows you, no, it's bricks and wood, and you're like, whoa, really? I thought this was gingerbread, and you're never going to think that again. You know what I mean? It's not
exactly.
And I think so that's what's fascinating. I think that's the key. That's honing in on the key of the therapeutic use of this stuff, and also MDMA, is that if a skilled practitioner or even accidentally a perspective gets shifted, like for example, if on MDMA a person was to journal, or even psilocybin, a person was to recount times that they went through what they thought was trauma, they might witness the perfection of the entire stream of their life, the entire connected thread from beginning to now. There's no way to go back from that awareness. You know what I mean? There's no way to reverse that perspective shift.
Right. Exactly, because during these experiences, you do remember everything. It's not like alcohol where, you drink enough and you black out, you don't remember what happened. You actually do remember. Everything does stick. You remember the whole experience, really. And that's exactly what happens, is these perspective shifts where, I remember specifically on that day, on December 22nd, when I was thinking, after about a few hours of just total bliss, I allowed myself to view what had happened. The marriage was pretty much like 3 years of trauma, really. A lot of fighting, a lot of anger. Oh, that's something I haven't mentioned either. There's so much to talk about. I used to have major anger issues for a long time, my whole life, really. and my ex-wife did as well. So that clashed. It was a major battle of the egos. I never considered myself an angry person. It's probably partial denial, but I had anger. I got angry quite a bit. And I am not joking about this. I haven't felt anger since that day. Wow. It just doesn't exist. I haven't felt anger or anxiety. I can't say I don't feel stressed because it's not like my life is easy. It's still life, but I view it much differently. I don't view it as stressful situations, but that's because I've put a lot of work into sort of a new philosophy I live by, and it's constant work. This isn't, I don't want people to think that this is a panacea, that you just take this, psychedelic once and your entire life is fixed. I've worked hard at it every single day since. It's just been beautiful work. It's been very easy to do, to apply, to get up and do the Wim Hof breathing, to do yoga, to practice, to study this Stoic philosophy, which I'm studying and applying, and it's changed everything. And so I can't necessarily say, okay, it's that one day that eradicated my anger. Mm-hmm. I can't say exactly what it is. It's obviously the culmination of everything, but I literally haven't felt anger since that day. Even when thinking back on everything that happened in my marriage. And on that day, I was looking back through all the stuff that happened and how it fell apart. It was really bad. The way it fell apart was very, very bad. And it made me even more angry. That's when a real darkness and evil entered my soul. I mean, beyond anything I could have ever imagined. I just became, which is part of the reason I had no desire to live anymore. I became a monster, and I didn't belong in this world anymore.
It's fascinating the way you describe that too. And I've heard it described by some people in that way, that a spirit has entered a person and then that's informing all their actions, all their thoughts, all their judgments. And then also that the anger almost always connects back to some kind of dynamic with the parents, and it's often particularly the mother. Would you say that stuff was healed? I mean, don't know much. You said your dad had died, and what about your mother? Was she still around?
She is. Yeah, she's still around. Mm-hmm. Yeah, she's towards the end of her life as well. She's 80 in her 80s, but she is still around. She's still around in health.
And did that experience change your connection with your family, and particularly her?
Absolutely, yes. It's pretty mind-blowing, actually. This book, which I'm now en route to Mexico to finish the book, and I have been finding out things about my dad since this all happened that I had no idea about. A lot of history. For instance, he actually suffered with depression for like 5 years when I was very young, and he came across some very similar methods to overcome his depression, not the psychedelics, but he basically reconnected with nature, started doing a routine that was very similar to the Wim Hof method. He was actually very similar to Wim Hof himself. And so I find it very fascinating that we both came across very similar methods to overcome our depression. So I'm actually looking into his history, and I'm going to be studying his history, and he's becoming more and more a part of my book. And this whole journey is just taking me down his path and how it all really kind of makes sense on everything that happened. So it sparked a curiosity in life that I never really had before as well. My mom and dad's history, and there's some other really fascinating aspects to his history that I'm pretty excited about that I'm going to include in the book as well.
Oh, excellent. I'm really excited to read the book. You've got to keep me on that list, and we're connected obviously on Facebook and everything, but yeah, I'd be very interested. And I will also put a link, for it, for people that get all the videos and stuff. I'll put a link once I get that from you. And I guess for now I can put the link to your Facebook page, right?
Yeah, I have a Facebook page for the book. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Very cool.
So you had asked me what I would suggest for somebody suffering right now. Right. That's a very good question. That's why I'm writing this book, but that I hope to have it published by the end of summer. That's my goal. We'll see how that goes. I'm pretty close to, it's progressing very fast. So I think I could make that happen. For now, there's the Facebook page where I put up a lot of the information that anybody can go and read and have a pretty good understanding of the history of psychedelics. I basically just sort of summarized a lot of Michael Pollan's book, so you can understand the science and the history of it. And that's step one, I believe, is lose the fear of these molecules, educate yourself on the power of these molecules, should your depression require that. Now, again, it's not a panacea. It's not going to work for everybody. I'm not a doctor. I definitely am not prescribing anything. This is my experience.
Sure.
And how it helped me, of course. I wouldn't want to put anybody in a situation where it's not recommended for them. For instance, people with psychosis, it is not recommended for them to do psychedelics. People with schizophrenia, it is not recommended for them to do psychedelics. So, psychedelics have the power to disrupt the neural connections that are exacerbating your depression. So that's a tool, a very, very powerful tool where if you're at the end of the road, like I was, it's something to look into. Okay, I just say start getting educated on it. And it's all over the place now. Now you just Google psychedelics, Google Denver, Google. It's huge. So you can find very comprehensive information to educate yourself on that. Aside from that, and almost even more than that, I would say that we have the power in our bodies, our brains, to do the same thing to overcome depression without the use of psychedelics. The Wim Hof method is one of those. So I would definitely say, we could talk for hours and hours and hours. We don't have that time, but the Wim Hof method has its own mind-blowing science behind it and mind-blowing effects that are all, I would say more powerful and definitely more applicable than psychedelics because it's simply oxygen. You're not inebriated. It's just simply a breathing technique combined with cold exposure. So that's a very powerful tool as well. I also got into this philosophy called Stoicism, Stoic philosophy, which you may have heard of.
Definitely, yeah.
Beautiful philosophy that I just happened to come across in those same weeks of December 22nd. And it's basically a philosophy from 2,000 years ago that was developed as a way to live. It was a school on how to live, literally, which is sorely missing in our education system today. And it's the reason it's so beautiful is it's usually very short passages, very small quotes. It's easy to digest. A lot of them are almost cliche because, for instance, the first quote that I came across was from Marcus Aurelius, who's Roman emperor back in the 1st century. And he would say to himself, you could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think. And that's it. Just that quote right there. Very easy to read. Okay, now it's sort of cliche, live every day as if it's your last, right? We all know that. We've all heard that. The thing is, it's true. It's very true. We all know people who have died. My father just died. I know several people who have died this year. We all know we are all going to die. It's very true. So when you really absorb it, when you really think about it, which the psychedelics are very good at, to absorb ideas and really feel them in your bones. So I've thought about these ideas and studied Stoic philosophy so much through my regimen with microdosing and sort of spaced out macrodosing, like once or twice or once every month or two, do a heavier psilocybin experience and think about these ideas. They really, really become a part of you. And the more I go into it, it just becomes your reality. Your thoughts create your reality. So when you start to live by these tenets, it really changes everything because it changes your perspective. One of the main tenets of Stoicism is to identify what's in your control, what's not in your control, and only focus on what is. And when you really get down to it, you're not in control of everything except your thoughts. And so by liberating your need to control anything else except your thoughts, you actually gain 100% control of the only thing you do have control of, which is your thoughts. And then that gives you that sense of control that you were craving before. It's just that it was a false sense of control because you don't have control over things, external environments, or other people.
Yeah,
so, all of these tools I used synergistically to rapidly get me out of depression it was within a day in retrospect, but I didn't believe it for a few weeks because it's too good to be true.
Yeah.
And, by a few weeks after, I was just like, wow, I'm healed, I'm fixed, I'm free. And that's when my life just turned to absolute magic.
Amazing.
So,
yeah. That's really
My
good.
message is there's a lot of things, a lot of tools that are in your control that are free, require nothing but oxygen, nothing but thought. And they're out there, your body and your mind is more powerful than we can possibly imagine. And I think that's probably the main message I would like to give to people who are depressed. Depression, there are no problems or depression. It's only opinions. So the key is to change that opinion.
Right. That's great, man. And these are a lot of the same realizations I've had and that I've incorporated into everything I teach as well. And I'm glad to hear it coming back from you, but you've gone down a completely different path and arrived at some of these core truths about existence. And something about the truth is that it is the truth. It's not, we each have our own truth. There's the truth, or else the word doesn't have any meaning. And that seems to be it. And it's provable to oneself, what you just said, that there's no problems, there's opinions.
Yes. I mean, I love that because it's so simple. It's absolutely true. I mean, just take a simple situation. If you're in the woods and a bear eats you, that's bad for you and good for the bear, right? Same situation.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's no inherent badness in it. There's no inherent evil in that event, even if you die. So people end up positing a sense of wrongness into the world. And then, of course, the news is helping reinforce it 24/7. But this assumption, this core horrible assumption that there's a wrongness in the world, but no analysis of how could that be possible? Like where would there be wrongness? You can say, oh, this defies my expectations, or I don't like it.
Right.
But not that there's something metaphysically wrong or that inherently wrong with events.
Right. Exactly. Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's basically they're events. That's it. I mean, that's a huge key, I think, that helped me. And to clarify reality is everything is just events, and it's the significance you attach to the events that make your perspective. And it's that makes you happy, sad, depressed, whatever it is simply your perspective, your opinion, and the significance you attach to events.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's so utterly simple. And I hope it's resonating deeply with some of the people listening. Like what you're saying, it's not only that the psychedelics, although they can be amazing, and let's hope they do get out there more and more and more. And it seems like that's what's going to happen. But even if not, a person has a body, they have the ability to take charge of their breathing, and they have the ability to examine what's actually going on in the mind instead of continuing to pretend to be a victim of what's going on in the mind. So.
Yes, exactly. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's for me, I guess it's sort of the way it's played out is the psychedelics helped disrupt the pattern I was on and start a new path, the Wim Hof method, and which is tied in with yoga and meditation, really kind of the same thing, allowed me to use my body to optimize my body into its best performance, best functioning, physical functioning, brain functioning, so that I could foster the new thoughts and feelings and perspectives that I want, which led me to Stoic philosophy, and which is really the end of the road. Is the philosophy you live by. I mean, I feel now Stoicism itself keeps me completely ecstatic every day. Just because I believe it so much, and I retrain. You can retrain your thoughts. You can retrain just like a muscle. Retrain all of your thinking. You can just do it over and over. Just do it by journaling. The Stoics were huge on journaling. That way you can monitor yourself, monitor your thoughts throughout the day, reflect on, you have 80,000 to 100,000 thoughts a day. We don't really think about what that does to our demeanor, our outlook on life. So you start becoming aware of those thoughts, start writing them down, start saying which ones are helpful, which ones are hurtful, and retraining. It's just like working out in the gym.
Right. Yeah, that is just amazing, and really, it I hope people are really letting that sink in and that they can run with it. And if they watch the video a few times, that they can put some of these things into practice. So those were the three things you mentioned when we talked before, right? That was the Wim Hof breathing stuff, the Stoic philosophy, and then of course the psychedelics.
Right.
But also we could put that in a category of brain change or perspective change, where of course one of the fastest and hardest hitting ways to do that is through a strong and powerful psychedelic. But a perspective change can occur without that, and that the data that the psychedelics are drawing on is data that's already present in reality.
Right.
So it is possible to see and to experience.
Definitely.
Very, very interesting. And of course, the best date to do it on is December 22nd because it's my birthday.
Absolutely.
That happened.
Another funny coincidence is that's the winter solstice, right? Is the shortest day of the year.
The darkest night of the year, right?
It's symbolic of rebirth as well throughout religion. Is those dates? It's kind of funny.
Yeah, and it's the moment that the day starts getting longer again.
Yes.
It's a perfect time, and it goes with your story just beautifully.
Yeah.
Well, man, so I will put up the link. I think I can find it right away. I'll put the link up in the comments under this, and then also when I post the video for the people who have bought the whole video package, I'll also put the link to your Facebook page there.
Definitely.
And I'll probably share it just with everybody on my Facebook page anyway, because I want everyone to look at it. And when did you say you think the book might be done?
I'm shooting for end of summer, so hopefully by September or so.
Okay, excellent. Yeah. And I look forward to that. And I know we talked about the possibility.
Oh, I'm also going to be shooting a documentary about all this time in Mexico while I'm there. Excellent.
Amazing. Yeah, I was just going to say, I know we had talked about all the other ideas that you might build around the book thing, maybe a group or maybe some kind of experience. So yeah, keep me up to date on that. And I'll also share that around with people I know.
Awesome.
And maybe someday we'll be together down there on the beach, putting on a workshop together. Who knows?
I would love it.
So keep that in mind. If that's the kind of thing.
Absolutely, yeah.
And keep in touch. And I hope you enjoy the rest of the speakers as well. I think it's an amazing event. And I want to thank you again very, very much for coming on to this. It's great for people to hear these things and to hear you talking about them just so you're a calm guy. You're not, like a conspiracy theorists. Nothing wrong with that, you know what I mean? But it's great to have just a calm, normal dude talking about these experiences instead of it being relegated to some kind of mystical realm or weird realm. This is for regular people too. This isn't just for the typical psychedelic adventurers and that kind of thing.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. And it's it shouldn't be nearly as intimidating as it seems. Right,
exactly. Yeah, I agree with you completely. So we're doing our tiny little part to chip away at that and to change that. So very, very happy to have you on, and I appreciate it tremendously.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity. I'm so happy to do this. I love talking about it. Obviously, I can ramble on, and so yeah, thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah, man, my pleasure, 100%. So I will be in touch, and we'll talk to you again soon. So I hope you have a wonderful day. I guess it's day where you are. It's getting on to evening where I am, and I hope to hear from you again soon.
Okay, sounds good. Take care. Enjoy Croatia.
Thank you. Good luck with everything, and enjoy California.
Okay, we'll talk soon.
Later.